Welcome to Small Arms Solutions. Today we have a real treat. This is something that I'm very close to and held very dear over these many years. Is the evolution of the TMag. Now I remember SHOT Show 2007. I was walking around SHOT Show and I saw this small little booth called Magpul. I saw a guy with these strange polymer magazines. I had seen black. I had seen a couple other colors, but what struck out was the fact these were polymer. Now, as somebody who's been an M16 historian in the past, polymer has not worked for M16 magazines, ever. The thermal ones that came out of Canada were complete garbage. The Canadian military never even adopted them, although eventually they got some polymer ones to work that they did sell with, for some of their international sales. But those magazines were never really that great. And you had the Ramline, you had other ones, they were just complete garbage. They just never really worked. They were never reliable. So I didn't really have a really good thought about what polymer magazines were. So I walk up to the booth, and there was a couple guys there, and I believe Drake Clark was one of them. And he had these. He was showing them. They were throwing these onto the ground. They had their cowboy boots. They were digging them in. They were grinding them into them, and these things weren't breaking. And I got the feel of it. Says, you know what, this is pretty cool. So I got in touch with those guys. I got back from the SHOT Show, and I asked them if they would send me some to look at, because I was writing for Small Arms Review at the time, and this just looked pretty cool. So they had sent me Gen 1 magazines, which you see here is the Gen 1, which was there's no window, and we have 2, which is referred to as the mag level, which has the window that will allow you to know how many rounds were still in there. Now, this is the one that I thought the most of. I really liked that this window. There was nothing out there that did this at the time. Now, the interesting thing about Magpul is they had messed around with this previously with trying to convert magazines over in some of their prototypes to have these windows, but didn't really work as well. So I had them send me some of these. And once I got to look at them, I could see there's some really interesting features on here. You had the window, but you also had this top on here too. Now the purpose of this top was when you put it on, it would push the top round down, so you would have no rounds touching the feed lips. So basically, if you were storing these long term, you wouldn't have to worry about any pressure on those feed lips when that was on. So you would be able to do that. So I just started using them. And I started using them, and I started using them, and I started using them, and I absolutely loved them. I had found guns that this actually had worked better in, because the rifles were very worn. They had a higher rate of fire, and it seemed like these things were just feeding that much better. So I started talking to them over the first couple of years, and I had worked on a couple of things with them too. There was a end plate that I wanted to have them make that was good for getting water out the bottom to help with over the beach conditions. And I actually still have those prototype ones today that they made that had the holes that were in them, so when the gun would fire, it would just shoot the water out the bottom rather than have it affect the magazine. So that was pretty cool too. Now they offered them in several different colors. You would see in the black, you had olive drab, you had tan, coyote, you had flat dark earth. They offered them in several colors. And the interesting thing about that was the strongest ones were always black. The only ones back in that day that I ever had crack were always the ones that had the color to them. But we're not talking about having them crack on any regular basis. But the only failures that I ever had were with the colors. And talking with the guys over there, they were saying that they were working on the dye additives to get them that much more reliable. These magazines started picking up really quickly for their durability and reliability, and I mean very quickly. Military started looking at them. So this was also around the time of the early parts of the global war on terror, and there was problems with the GI magazines, and these were starting to be looked at. They were working better in the desert. They were more reliable. They were actually increasing the reliability of the weapons platform over what they currently had. It was making the rifle that much better. Well, now we had some other guns that came out. We had the HK416 that came out, and that was a problem because of the shape of the magazine. Well, the HK416 and the British L85 had a longer front part here on the magazine, while these would not fit in. So Magpul introduced these, which refers to as the EMag. What the EMag is extended it downward, so this would work in the HK416 and it would work in the L85. And these are starting to be used by them. Well, lessons learned came out with the Gen 2. Of course, the Gen 2, you had a window and a non-window. The Gen 2 was some increases, some changes in some of the geometry. It was a little bit strong. It was a stronger of a polymer, and they basically went on to replace the Gen 1s. Well, the interesting thing about that was the Gen 2 PMags right now, they're now referred to as the MO, which is basically the MO is manufacturer's original equipment. Many of you guys who buy brand new rifles these days, they come with MOs. Those were the magazines. Then in 2016, they came out with the Gen 3s. The Gen 3s were probably much more of a game changer. Again, you have nearly 15 years or so of evolution in polymers, strengthening the polymers and such to make a new magazine. Well, the new magazine, what was even better about those was instead of having to have a EMAG, the EMAGs are no longer necessary. The EMAG now features were built into the Gen 3, so Gen 3 will work in everything. It doesn't matter if it's 416, doesn't matter if it's a regular M4. The Gen 3s generally will work in anything that takes a TMag magazine, increase the strength of the materials, and this also was the generation in 2011 that was adopted by the U.S. Marine Corps for the M27. Give a little bit of a history on the M27 IAR. There was a reason for that. Now, those of you who are familiar with the Enhanced Performance magazine, because of the M855A1, it was necessary due to the shape of the projectile and how hard that it was, and the standard magazines were not lifting the cartridge the nose up enough, so it was going to clear the barrel extension and the receiver, and it was causing damage. So the Enhanced Performance magazine, basically, the way the Phillips were, they raised the tip of that bullet up so it presented it higher so it wouldn't do that. Well, the Magpul already did that. The Gen 3 already did that. The other thing was that M855A1 ammunition was not working very well in the M27 IARs. Those of you who are familiar with HK416s, they run at a very, very high rate of fire. That's part of what their reliability is. And that's with M855. Now you increase the pressures with the M855A1, the thing is screaming a very, very high cyclic rate. The problem was, when those were going that fast, standard magazines, GI magazines, aluminum magazines, they were not able to keep up with that rate of fire with the magazine spring and the shot column raising that up fast enough for it to be able to present to feed to that cyclic rate. Well, these polymer magazines, because they're very self-lubricious, you have a polymer body, a polymer follower, and you have a much better magazine spring. It raises everything up that much more efficient. It was able to keep up with that higher cyclic rate and keep those guns running. So the Marine Corps, a lot of it had to do with their use of the M855A1 because it was that much better than the EPM magazine that worked in those guns. However, throughout the years, even though these magazines had not yet been adopted by the U.S. government, you would see them. I saw a lot of them over in Afghanistan. In fact, at Bagram, I walked into the PX over there, and these were for sale in the PX. So soldiers would buy these themselves because, again, they were that much of an enhancement to their weapons performance. Now, if you look over to the right here, you'll see we do have some black magazines here that were 20-rounders. We have the original 20-round magazine. We have a Gen 3 20-round magazine. So one of the things I do want to talk about that makes these things very, very special is the way that they are, the way that the shapes are of them. One of the things that makes this magazine very, very reliable, and you're going to see a photograph which shows the constant curve design of the shot column. If you look at the way the USGI magazine is, it comes straight down and then curves when it comes out to the magazine. So basically the rounds are coming up, they're shifting, and they're moving up. The way that these are, it's a constant curve, so it goes in an even curve all the way up. That increases reliability in feeding. That was one of the better benefits. If you look here, we have a cutaway of that here. This cutaway I had made when I was at Colt because I did a presentation at General Keys around 2009 that I had felt that Colt should be getting away from the aluminum magazines and everything but their government contract and offering these to their customers instead, because this magazine improved the performance of the weapon over the GI ones. So if they were to have given these with the rifles instead of the aluminum ones, they're giving the customer an improved performing weapons platform. So I had them make me the cutaway. You're seeing a photograph also of one that was cutaway where you can see the shot column. I had those made to do a presentation at General Keys. Unfortunately, at the time, they basically were more interested in government contracts. If this is what the government wants, we're going to stick with that. It wouldn't be until some years later where Colt would decide, we're going to get away from that. We're actually going to provide PMags, and a lot of the international sales that we had at Colt, they were using PMags, and they still are today. So this magazine, in my opinion, is state of the art. It's the best magazine that's available in the world, and it's used all over. There are people who have had comments about them in the cold. They don't work well in the cold. Well, I've been in upstate New York. I've been in Denmark. I've been in many places where polymer magazines are used, and I didn't really see a problem. But, again, I don't know everything. So this is sort of a iteration of the history of this magazine and where it's gone over the last, oh my God, 2007, 2017, 2027, and nearly 30 years, like 26 years, 27 years. This magazine is still top of the game, and it is the most used magazine in the industry. So giving a little bit of a history of what goes on here, now we're going to lead into what this video is truly about. The brand new 2024 released Magpul TMag, the first Magpul introduced polymer magazine. Now, this is not necessarily as new as you may think. Very fortunate, because I worked with Magpul over the years, to have access to these two bad boys right here. These were two of prototype magazines that were probably, I would say 2009, 8, 2007, 8, in that time period. Magpul had sent me these to test for them. They were their first translucent magazines. If you see, this one was more of a smoky type. And this one here, if you see when I squeeze on that, this one will squeeze. It's not like the other materials here. The problem is when you go with a translucent material, they tend to be a lot more, they're not nearly as solid. They squeeze a lot more. And this was a problem that Magpul had. They were not going to release a magazine that was as any less durable as their flagship models. They developed a second model, which it was supposedly a enhanced material as well. This stuff, I think, was even worse because of the way this would squeeze. And they felt that this was not durable enough, and they were not going to release a translucent magazine until they got what they felt was right. So, as you can imagine, probably say 2009, say this 2008, 2009, when these things came out, and they were looking at them. And now we are here in 2024. They got a material that worked. They tested it, and now they were introducing their own translucent magazine. So what we have here is a TMag anti-tilt follower. We have some nice gripping grooves on the side here, and if you look close, you have numbers on here that tells you exactly how many rounds that you have on here, and you also have your grate down here where you can use your Sharpie, and you can put what number this magazine is, so you can keep track of it. This magazine also is developed for use with the M855A1, lifting that round up. Very lightweight magazine. This basically is now going to be competing with with Lancer, probably ETS. HK had one that was translucent. Unfortunately for HK, their translucent magazine had problems. I actually had broken several of those in testing. And H&K had gotten rid of those in favor of a new polymer magazine that has a window sort of similar to that of the Magpul Mag Level, and they discontinued the use of their clear magazine. The clear magazines HK had dealt with a lot because of the use of the G3s. But that was a different kind of a polymer. That was a very, very thick polymer. It wasn't restricted to the diameter of the magazine well of the TMag magazine. That was where the problem always came in, was because the magazine for the M16 was made out of aluminum, so it was very thin. It wasn't thick steel like you'd see like in an AK. So it was a little harder to work around that to get a polymer that worked. So I was very happy to get to see they did this, and well, this was introduced, I think, at SHOT Show. So January, and now it took nearly a year, and I think these didn't start hitting the streets until a month or two ago. So I had received 5 of these from Magpul, which I've been waiting for a while, and we're going to run them through the ringer, do some testing on them. Overall, it looks very, very well made. It looks strong. It looks durable. We're going to take these to the range, and we're going to see how they shoot. Well, again, we put these things in a standard rifle, and we shot them. We didn't do anything crazy with throwing them or anything like that. Perhaps at a later date, we may do some drop tests on them. But one of the things about Magpul is they are not going to release anything until it's ready. So I don't believe for a minute that we're going to see any problems with these, in the long haul. Synthetic magazines are one of those things that you do replace. You're not going to use this forever. After every X amount of rounds, you may want to replace them. For as far as your training magazines versus your go-to magazines, you always want to have your go-to magazines new condition magazines. And then you swap those out every couple of years if you keep them loaded. Now, another little fallacy we're going to talk about is, can you leave magazines loaded? Well, a lot of people say you can't because keeping it compressed causes it to wear. That is not true. What causes a spring to wear is constantly going up and down, up and down. Once it's down, it stays. You're not going to lose anything by having it staying down. It's cycling up and down is what causes it to wear. So the only thing that you could have potentially happen with a magazine, and this happens with aluminum magazines too. Aluminum magazines, if you were to leave those things over extended periods of time, what generally goes on aluminum magazine is the spot welds on the back. They'll crack. On polymer magazines, you can generally get a crack up in here after a while, where the seam is from the mold. You can get that. Generally, you don't really get too many cracks in the Phillips. That's just more for damage. And one of the benefits of the polymer magazines over the other magazines is polymer has no memory. If I was to drop that and it bent inward, it would go right back to its original shape. If you were to drop an aluminum or a steel magazine, drop it, it bends, it stays bent. So if a polymer magazine is going to fail, it's going to break and your bolts are going to fly all over the place. You're going to know it. You're not going to have one that's going to be breaking on its own. It's once you have a bend in it, unless you can fix that bend, the magazine is done. This, it's done when it breaks. And quite frankly, over the years, this is what I've used. A majority of my magazines that I use are Magpul. If you watch my videos, you'll see it. But you'll also see that I have a box of magazines that I go through, and I have, to text compatibility, I have probably 30 different magazines from throughout the industry I do. But my go-to magazines have been and probably always will be the Magpul PMags. This is definitely a welcome addition. I consider myself very lucky to be able to show you these because I don't know how many of these there are in circulation anywhere outside of Magpul. I think I was probably one of the first guys that was working with them back in those days. They had sent me stuff to see what I thought about them. And of course, as you can see, I've kept all this stuff because, again, I really, really like the history. And every time they have something new, I get it and I put it into this collection that shows this evolution. So I thought it'd be cool to show you the evolution of the magazines from the beginning, and then to get into this part right here. And Magpul gets all the credit in the world to the fact that they were not going to release these just because people wanted them. They were not going to release these until they were reliable enough that they would put their name on it. And they knew back in those days that these two magazines were not ready for prime time. They waited until they got a material that was proper, that was going to be durable, it was going to be reliable. They tested it, and they knew it was ready to put out. If you look at these, you can see how early these are. These don't even have overstop notches on them. You have an overstop notch on here. It didn't have these. And also, if you look at the side of the magazine here, and you were to look at the overstop notches on here, you'll see how much more you have on this area right here for over travel, so you don't over travel into the rifle and go past the magazine release. So these were some benefits that over the years had happened. So, but you can see that these were very, very early. This would be considered Gen 1 era right here. This was before even the Gen 2s came out. But it just shows you the evolution, how a company can take something from a concept. They can make prototypes, and if it's not good enough, they're not gonna put it out. They're gonna wait until newer materials, because again, the materials used on here very different. These are two different materials, and then this is a newer one. And we've come a long ways in the last 15 years on strengths of polymer. So I hope you guys do enjoy this video on these magazines. Again, this is something that I followed my entire career and watching Magpul grow into the premier magazine manufacturer for this family of weapons. Hope you enjoyed this video. Please click like, please subscribe, and even better share. Thank you.